We all see the headlines, right? The massive IPOs, the visionary founders on magazine covers, the billion-dollar valuations. We're sold this dream that you can change the world with just a brilliant idea and a garage. But what if I told you that story is mostly a myth? What if the glamorous world of startups has a dark, hidden reality that almost nobody talks about? Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and find out why most startups are actually destined to fail and what the survivors aren't telling you.
Okay, so let's look at two companies. On one hand, you've got Uber, a name everyone knows, a global sensation that went public in 2019. But on the other hand, there was its competitor, Sidecar, which shut its doors a few years earlier. Now here's the kicker. A lot of experts will tell you that Sidecar actually had the better technology. So how did one become a verb for hailing a ride, while the other just disappeared? The answer comes down to a powerful psychological trap.
And that trap is called survivorship bias. See, we get so fixated on the winners, the Ubers of the world that make all the headlines, that we completely ignore the thousands upon thousands of failures, like Sidecar, that litter the startup graveyard. This bias paints a picture that's way too optimistic and, frankly, dangerously misleading about what it really takes to succeed. So, just how bad are the odds, really? Well, they're pretty bad. Study after study, year after year, they all point to the same brutal number, 90%. That's the percentage of all startups that ultimately fail. So think about that for a second. In the startup world, failure isn't the exception to the rule, it's the default setting. The real question is, why?
All right, so what's the first huge trap that so many founders fall into? It's what we can call the product market myth. This is the deep-seated belief that if you just have a revolutionary product, that's your golden ticket to success. But as we're about to see, a great idea is completely worthless if nobody actually wants to buy it.
This all boils down to the single most critical concept for any new company, product market fit. It's that magic moment when what you've built is something a real market desperately needs. The problem is, way too many founders fall in love with their own idea, their baby, and they rush to build it without ever stopping to ask the most important question. Am I solving a real problem that people would actually pay me to fix?
And hey, don't think it's just small companies that screw this up. Even the giants get it wrong. Just look at Apple's Newton back in the 90s. On paper, this thing was incredible, a forerunner to the iPad, with handwriting recognition and everything. But in reality, the market just wasn't ready for it. For $700 back then, it was a cool solution to a problem that, well, most people didn't really have. It's a perfect example of a brilliant product failing because there was no product market fit.
Okay, but what about the flip side of that coin? Let's circle back to Sidecar. They had a great product, and they even had big-time funding from folks like Google Ventures. Their failure wasn't the tech. It was terrible marketing. They were just completely outmaneuvered and outspent by Uber. It just goes to show, even if you build a better mousetrap, the world isn't going to beat a pass to your door if they don't even know you exist.
All right, so let's say you've cracked it. You've got a perfect product, your marketing is on point. Smooth sailing from here, right? Well, not so fast. The next giant pitfall is what we call the founder fallout. Because a lot of the time, the biggest threat to a startup isn't out there in the market. It's right inside the company.
According to the Harvard Business Review, a jaw-dropping 65% of startups fail specifically because of conflict between the co-founders. Yeah, you heard that right. More than the competition, more than running out of money, it's the breakdown of the human relationships at the very top that sinks the ship.
You know, when you look at the really successful ventures, you often see this perfect partnership. You need the innovator, your Steve Jobs type. This is the visionary, the one who figures out the what and the why. But, and this is a huge but, you desperately need the operator, the Tim Cook type, the person who handles the complex day-to-day execution, the how and the when. Without both, you're basically flying with one wing.
This quote just perfectly captures what it feels like. You solve one massive problem, say a cash flow crisis. You feel like you've just climbed a mountain, but then you get to the top and what do you see? A much, much bigger mountain waiting right behind it, like an aggressive competitor trying to put you out of business. It never stops. Now, navigating those mountains obviously takes a ton of hard work, but that brings us to maybe the biggest and most uncomfortable myth of all. The idea that hard work is all it takes. It's a popular story, but it conveniently ignores two huge factors that play a massive role in success: privilege and pure dumb luck.
We all know this story, right? The classic rags to riches tale. It's inspiring, it's romantic, and for the vast majority of super successful founders, It's also a complete fiction.
Let's just take Elon Musk. Does the guy work incredibly hard? Absolutely. But he also came from immense wealth. I mean, his own father said they had so much money it was hard to close the safe. And here's the thing, it is a lot easier to take huge risks and work 100-hour weeks when you have a financial safety net the size of a continent.
And this isn't a one-off thing. Take the founder of the successful Indian brand Theobroma. While she definitely worked hard, she also had access to an elite education in Paris that costs a fortune, and got significant seed funding from her father. The lesson is simple. Hard work is essential, but when you combine it with privilege and luck, it creates a powerful advantage that most people just don't have.
And then there's the wild card of just plain luck, especially in the form of timing. I mean, why did Facebook succeed when MySpace, Orkut, and even Google's social network failed? They all had great teams and good products. But Facebook just happened to arrive at the exact right moment when the market was finally ready. And that's a variable that is completely out of any founder's control.
So let's say you do it. You navigate all of that, you've got a great product, a solid team, perfect timing, and you even land that coveted venture capital funding. You've made it, right? This is the moment every founder dreams of. But this is often the investor's trap, because for many, this isn't the finish line. It's where the real problems are just getting started.
The second you take that investor money, you step onto a treadmill that's only getting faster. You're not just building a company anymore. You're building an asset for your investors. The pressure is immense. Grow at all costs so you can raise the next round of funding at a higher valuation. With each round, your own stake in the company gets smaller, and your original mission to solve a problem often gets warped into a single focus, maximizing profit for the big exit.
For a devastating real-world example of this, just look at Byju's. The company started with a really noble mission to make education accessible, but intense investor pressure for hyper-growth led to a toxic culture, aggressive sales, and inflated valuations. The original mission got lost, and the entire business came crashing down.
So when you put all of these pieces together, it leads to one final crucial reality check for anyone thinking about this path. You have to understand the fundamental difference between starting a business and launching a startup.
Look at it this way. Starting a business is like opening a new taxi company to compete in an existing market. It's tough, for sure, but the model is proven. Starting a startup, on the other hand, is trying to invent Uber itself, creating something that wants to disrupt and completely change an entire industry. The risks, the challenges, and the chance of failure are exponentially higher.
Now, the point of this isn't to discourage you, but to arm you with reality. A much more pragmatic path is to prepare. Forget the myth of the college dropout. Finish your education, get a job, and learn how a real business operates from the inside. Build up some savings so you have a cushion, and build a network. That kind of experience is absolutely invaluable.
So the ultimate takeaway is this. Success isn't about having one brilliant idea. It's about meticulously navigating a minefield of product-market fit, team dynamics, timing, and investor pressure. The default setting is, and always will be, failure. So maybe the most important question a founder can ask isn't how can I win, but how will I survive? Answering that honestly might be the only way to beat the odds.